Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So for this one, this is going to be a bit different. So it is part of my folklore talk series, but I kind of went down a bit of a rabbit hole earlier on. So I was thinking that in one of my previous videos I mentioned about Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So I thought, I wonder if I can see them online. So there is a website. I did find a website that does has them, but it also has the tales from Hans Christian Andersen. So there is a difference between the two, because I didn't know this to start with. This is what I mean by I went down a rabbit hole. Um, so the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, they are based on folklore, German folklore, and the more so stick to the folklores that they grew up with in Germany. And they also focus on keeping those tales alive, and they always have a moral lesson in there. But they do tend to be a bit on the darker side. But for Hans Christian Andersen, his fairy tales are ones that he wrote, so they're not by. So they might have the inspiration from different folk tales, but they're not the exact same situation. Like, he wrote it more so for social commentary and based it more on his experience. So Grimm's brothers, they got it more inspired and more close to folklores in Germany, and about the about the culture and identity of being German. And Hans Christian Andersen, he basically, it's more fairy tale literature, so it wasn't so close to folk tales that you might have heard before. It's more personal, I guess that's the best way of saying it. Or I just thought about this. You guys get used to me. So I just thought, good way of remembering it is that Brothers Grimm is like the emo cousin that you don't really talk to, because Grimm's fairy tales do tend to be a bit on the darker side, whereas Hans Christian Andersen ones are more, they're kind of more blurred, the lines between fantasy and reality. So they're a bit more, they're not as dark, because I have heard about different ones from both, and they do sound quite interesting. Some of them, the Disney films, if you guys are into Disney, I love Disney, so like The Little Mermaid, that's one of Hans Christian Andersen ones. But then, let me just double, actually I've got a website. I should be more organised in this show, not really, sorry about this guys, but yeah, let me just have a look. So Andersen's, you're looking at, though I will be a organised little scholar at some point. So Hans Christian Andersen ones are ones like Your Little Mermaid. I'm just looking at the list for any other ones that are like Disney. And you got The Princess and the Pig, that's a popular one. The Snow Queen, so that'll be like Frozen. And this will be where obviously Disney are going to make it a bit more kid friendly potentially, because I have heard, like, for example, The Little Mermaid, I won't give too much because I'll do a separate video just talking about that, but like that one, for example, let's just say that Ariel doesn't get a prince at the end. It's not quite a happy ending, and let me just get it up for Brothers Grimm. Well, I guess you could say that Brothers Grimm are like me, being a vampire and all that. And then Hans Christian Andersen's ones are more so like, I don't know, I guess a fairy. I'm just trying to think in mystic. Yeah, like I'll probably say that's probably the best way of saying it. So like me, I'll be more the Grimms, because like, being a vampire, being a badass, cute as vampire. But then Hans Christian Andersen ones will be like my fairy, like, cousin or sister, I guess. You know how you have one that's all dark and mysterious? That's me, and I'll be Grimm's. And then if I had a sister who happened to be a fairy or something, or or could still be a vampire, just a pastel vampire. Yeah, so if I had a pastel vampire sister, and then they would be like that Hans Christian Andersen ones. But anyway, I digress. So the Grimm's ones, um, that is more so like they've done Rapunzel, so and Hansel and Gretel, and I have heard, well, Hansel and Gretel, I mean, like the witch tries to cook them up. So that one's a bit darker already. But yeah, so there's got to be some that you're familiar with and might have heard of before. And then there's got to be some that you haven't. Like this one that I'm going to be talking about today is called Bearskin, and I never heard of this one before, so this is going to be new for me as well. So this one's was Grimm, so I think emo for this one. Right, so it's got to be emo for Grimm's, and then pastel for Hans Christian Andersen. I'm having way too much fun here. But there we go. One. So, Bearskin. There's once a young fellow who enlisted as a soldier, conducted himself bravely, and was always the foremost when it rained bullets. So long as the war lasted, all went well. But then peace was made. He received his dismissal, and the captain said he might go where he liked. His parents were dead, and he no longer had a home. So he went to his brothers and begged them to take him in and keep him until war broke out again. The brothers, however, were hard-hearted and said, What can we do with thee? Thou art no use to us. Go and make a living for thyself." The soldier had nothing left but his gun. He took that on his shoulder and went forth into the world. He came to a wide heath on which nothing was to be seen but a circle of trees. Under these he sat softly down and began to think over his face. "I have no money," thought he. "I have learnt no trade but that of fighting, and now that they have made peace they don't want me any longer, so I see beforehand that I shall have to starve." All at once he heard a rustling, and when he looked around, a strange man stood before him. He wore a green coat and looked right stately, but had a hideous cloven foot. "I know already what thou art in need of," said the man. "Gold and possessions shall thou have, as much as thou canst make away with do what thou wilt. But first I must know if thou art fearless, that I may not bestow my money in vain." "So a soldier and fear, how can these two things go together?" he answered. "Thou canst put me to the proof." "Very well then," answered the man. "Look behind thee." The soldier turned round and saw a large bear which came growling towards him. "Oh!" shouted the soldier, I will tickle thy nose for thee, so that thou shalt soon lose thy fancy for growling." And he aimed at the bear and shot it through the muzzle. It fell down and never stirred again. "I see quite well," said the stranger, "that thou art not wanting in courage, but there is still another condition which thou wilt have to fulfil." "If it does not endanger my salvation," replied the soldier, who knew very well who was standing by him. If it does, I'll have nothing to do with it." "Thou wilt look to that for thyself," answered Green Coat. Thou shalt for the next 7 years neither wash thyself, nor comb thy beard, nor thy hair, nor cut thy nails, nor say one paternoster." Never heard that word before. "I will give thee a coat and a cloak, which during this time thou must wear. If thou diest during these 7 years, thou art mine. If thou remainest alive, thou art free, and rich to boot, for all the rest of thy life." The soldier thought of the great extremity in which he now found himself, and as he so often had gone to meet death, he resolved to risk it now also, and agreed to the terms. The devil took off his green coat, gave it to the soldier, and said, "If thou hast this coat on thy back, I'll put off thy hand into the pocket, thou wilt always find it full of money." Then he pulled the skin off the bear and said, "This shall be thy cloak and thy bed also, for thereon shalt thou sleep, and in no other bed shalt thou lie. And because of this apparel shalt thou be called Bearskin." After this, the devil vanished. The soldier put the coat on, felt at once in the pocket, and found that the thing was really true. Then he put on the bearskin and went forth into the world, and enjoyed himself, refraining from nothing that did him good and his money harm. During the first year his appearance was passable, but during the second he began to look like a monster. His hair covered nearly the whole of his face, his beard was like a piece of coarse felt, his fingers had claws, and his face was so covered with dirt that if cress had been sown on it, it would have come up. Whosoever saw him ran away, but as he everywhere gave the poor money to pray that he might not die during the 7 years, and as he paid well for everything, he still found shelter. In the 4th year he entered an inn where the landlord would not receive him, and would not even let him have a place in the stable, because he was afraid the horses would be scared. But as Bearskin thrust his hand into his pocket and poured out a handful of ducats, the host let himself be persuaded and give him a room in an outhouse. Bearskin was, however, obliged to promise not to let himself be seen, lest the inn should get a bad name. As Bearskin was sitting alone in the evening, and wishing from the bottom of his heart that the 7 years were over, he heard a loud lamenting in a neighbouring room. He had a compassionate heart, so he opened the door and saw an old man weeping bitterly and wringing his hands. Bearskin went nearer, but the man sprang to his feet and tried to escape from him. At last, when the man perceived that Bearskin's voice was human, he let himself be prevailed on, and by kind words Bearskin succeeded so far that the old man revealed the cause of his grief. His property had dwindled away by degrees. He and his daughters would have to starve, and he was so poor that he could not pay the innkeeper, and was to be put in prison. If that is your only trouble, said Bearskin, I have plenty of money. He caused the innkeeper to be brought thither, paid him, and put a purse full of gold into the poor old man's pocket besides. When the old man saw himself set free from all the troubles, he did not know how to be grateful enough. Come with me, said he to Bearskin. My daughters are all miracles of beauty. Choose one of them for thyself as a wife. When she hears what thou hast done for me, she will not refuse thee. Thou dost in truth look a little strange, but she will soon put thee to rights again. This pleased Bearskin well, and he went. When the eldest saw him, she was so terribly alarmed at his face that she screamed and went away. Great first impression. The second stood still and looked at him from head to foot, but then she said, how can I accept a husband who no longer has a human form? The shaven bear that once was here and passed itself off for a man pleased me far better, for that at any rate it wore a hussar's dress and white gloves. If it were nothing but ugliness, I might get used to that. The youngest, however, said, dear father, that must be a good man to have helped you out of your trouble, so if you have promised him a bride for doing it, your promise must be kept. It was a pity that Bearskin's face was covered with dirt and with hair, for if not they might have seen how delighted he was when he heard those words. He took a ring from his finger, broke it in two, and gave her one half. The other he kept for himself. He wrote his name, however, on her half, and hers on his, and begged her to keep her peace carefully. And then he took his leave and said, I must still wander about for 3 years, and if I do not return, then thou art free, for I shall be dead. But pray to God to preserve my life. The poor betrothed bride dressed herself entirely in black, and when she thought of a future bridegroom, tears came into her eyes. Nothing but contempt and mockery fell to her lot from her sisters. Take care, said the eldest. If thou givest him thy hand, he will strike his claws into it. Beware, said the second. Bears like sweet things, and if he takes a fancy to thee, he will eat thee up. Thou must always do as he likes, began the elder again, or else he will growl. And the second continued, but the wedding will be a merry one, for bears dance well. The bride was silent and did not let them vex her. Bearskin, however, travelled about the world from one place to another, did good where he was able, and gave generously to the poor, that they might pray for him. At length, as the last day of the 7 years dawned, he went once more out on the hearth, and seated himself beneath the circle of trees. It was not long before the wind whistled, and the devil stood before him and looked angrily at him. Then he threw Bearskin his old coat and asked for his own green one back. We have not got so far as that yet, answered Bearskin. Thou must first make me clean. Whether the devil liked it or not, he was forced to fetch water and wash Bearskin, comb his hair and cut his nails. After this he looked like a brave soldier, and was much more handsomer than he had been before. When the devil had gone away, Bearskin was quite light-hearted. He went into town and put on a magnificent velvet coat, seated himself in a carriage drawn by 4 white horses, and drove to his bride's house. No one recognised him. The father took him for a distinguished general, and led him into the room where his daughters were sitting. He was forced to place himself between the 2 eldest. They helped him to wine, gave him the best pieces of meat, and thought that in all the world that they had never seen a handsomer man. The bride, however, sat opposite to him in her black dress, and never raised her eyes, nor spoke a word. When at length he asked the father if he would give him one of his daughters to wife, the 2 eldest jumped up, ran into their bedrooms to put on the splendid dresses, for each of them fancied she was the chosen one. The stranger, as soon as he was alone with his bride, brought out his half of the ring, and threw it in a glass of wine which he reached across the table to her. She took the wine, but when she drank it and found the half ring lying at the bottom, her heart began to beat. She got the second half, which she wore on a ribbon around her neck, joined them, and saw that the 2 pieces fitted exactly together. Then said he, I am thy betrothed bridegroom, whom thou sawest as Bearskin, but by God's grace I have again received my human form, and have once more become clean. He went up to her, embraced her, and gave her a kiss. In the meantime the 2 sisters came back in full dress, and when they saw that the handsome man had fallen to the share of the youngest, and heard that he was Bearskin, they ran out full of anger and rage. One of them drowned herself in the well, the other hanged herself in a tree. In the evening someone knocked at the door, and when the bridegroom opened it, it was the devil in the black coat, who said, Seest thou, I have now got 2 souls in the place of thy one. And that's the end of that one. So that one was quite a interesting one, to be fair. It was quite a cool one. He's quite good at the devil ended up tricking him. That's where you gotta be careful with us dark entities. Could be a bit sneaky. But no, I really enjoyed that. It is definitely darker to the other fairy tales that you hear, especially ones that you hear as a kid. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. But let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you all in the next one.